Okay, we're going to continue the lesson in iMovie on how to add a sound clip to your Flash movie. And so what I've done in the previous lesson was I showed you how to save your sound clip into the library and then take that sound clip and add it on a new layer to the existing movie that you have and position it in the correct position so that when it gets to the proper place where the sound needs to be included so that it's in time with your movie, you can position it in the correct place. Well, at the end of the last lesson here in YouTube that I showed you how to simply drop the sound clip onto the layer and onto your stage, and then move that sound clip into a position where the sound effect needs to be in time with the movie. Now let's go ahead and add a second and a third layer with the same sound clip so that it's in time at the proper place with the sound effect corresponding with the object that needs to have sound. So let's go ahead and do that. So now every time that I add sound to any part of my Flash movie, I'm going to make sure that I add a new layer. I don't want to add the same sound effect on the same layer. It gets confusing. Okay? Now, what I did here earlier was I added this sound clip that you see here in our library, okay, to my stage in the proper place for this sound to correspond right here with this bounce of this ball. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer. Well, let's name these layers correctly. Okay, so let's make this boing or sound effect 1, or name it something simple. Okay, so we're going to name this layer, and we're just going to name it bounce 1. Okay, and now we're going to add another layer to our Flash movie, and we'll name this one. Oh, did we add that? Let's see, where did it add? Let's go ahead and check here very quickly. Let's go ahead and add a new layer there. Alright, so we'll name this one Bounce 2. Ooh, let's make sure I put the correct symbol in there. And we're going to have a bounce layer number 3. Okay, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to, now we've got our first sound clip, which is right here. That's going to be our bounce number 1. And let's go and set this up so that we can put in our bounce layer into the correct position for the next layer. There we go. Now I've selected the keyframe where I want to add I'm making sure that my sound effect is in time with this shape. It's at the bottom of this guideline where it's bouncing, and so it needs to be at the very bottom so that when the sound effect goes off, it's at the very bottom here. So let's go ahead now, and we can either drag this sound effect, which is the same here. You just have a visual aid plus the name. You can select this one and drag it on and drop it here. You can also select this sound effect, which is the same, just the visual aid, and drop it here also. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to drop it here. I am on bounce number 2 layer on the correct frame, and let's go ahead and add it. Now, it did not add that because I didn't create it as a keyframe. Okay, so let's go ahead and select this layer and highlight it. I'm going to double click and highlight it, and I've selected it. Now I'm going to move it into the proper position, and now it's in the proper position to go off when the sound needs to. Let's select frame bounce number 3, and there's the position of the ball. Is it 1 too early or 1 too late? There we go. We'll go with frame 39. Now I'm going to make this I can make it a keyframe here, so I can insert timeline and then a keyframe, and now rather than just selecting it, having it the sound effect placed in frame number 1, default to frame number 1, now I've selected this frame as a keyframe. Now the Flash movie knows that when I drop this sound in, it's going to stay right here. So let's go ahead and select our sound effect, drop it in on this stage, anywhere on the stage, and now you can see that it added. So that was a good thing to see. If I select this frame and I find that, yes, this is the frame where the ball is at the lowest point on this guide motion layer, or this motion guide layer, yeah, if I select it, this frame, that's fine. It helps me to see where the ball's positioned, or the object that I need to have in time with the correct frame for the sound effect to go off at the right time. But if I don't make it a keyframe, it'll just default and place it in on the number one frame. That's not too handy when you have 300, 400, 1,000 frames. You don't want it to default and go all the way down to the number one frame and then have to drag it all the way back to the correct frame. Simply select the frame in time that corresponds with your object where you need the sound to go in on that layer, into that keyframe. Select it, and then do a insert timeline keyframe, insert that keyframe, and then once it creates that keyframe, your sound will drop right into where it needs to be placed. Now, the final thing we need to do here is to watch this. Well, we actually have two things left to do, but let's watch it and play it. So we'll go ahead and play this. There we go. So the sound is in the correct position, but we still have our guide layer that we've drawn showing. How do I get rid of this guide layer? Well, we're going to come back here to our layers, and we're going to scroll down to the guide layer, and we're going to select the eye and turn off the guide layer. Now let's go ahead. Now we don't have that guide layer. Let's go ahead and just watch our movie. And as you can see, everything's timed nicely. We don't see the guide layer anymore, and everything lines up. The sound goes when we need it to, and I can always come back and scroll through my layers here. That's what I'm doing. I'm actually going to scroll through these layers. I just position my cursor over the timeline or over the layers, and then I can scroll up or down the layer. Now I haven't named layer number one. Let's just name this layer before we leave today, because I'm big on naming our layers. Okay, so, oops, is it going to let me name it? Let's go ahead here. There we go. Double click on the layer, and we're just going to call this the green ball. And now all of my layers are named. I do want to leave this. I can change this guide layer name, but I'm just going to leave it as guide layer, or I can name it guide layer, motion guide, and then the layer here, I can change this layer number one and just change it to green ball. Motion guide layer, green ball. Okay, and now I've got all my layers named, and that's what you should do when you're creating your sound effect with your Flash movie. I hope this lesson was helpful. If you need help, you can always ask me for assistance or replay this lesson. If you have any problems, you can always email me, and if I'm not available or if you're trying this outside of class. Okay, good luck to you, and I hope that you're successful with this. Good luck.